Tonight's broadcast is sponsored by Fluet Knowledge by Fluet.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Mark Fluet broadcast. Today we're going to talk about a few things that have kind of been on my mind, so I kind of like to throw it out there. Let's see what you think about it. Let's talk about the first process of Dr. Stephen Greer. He has a seminar where he's addressing a few people from all over the place, from Washington State, New Jersey. This person was with the Disclosure Project, how he had people that was able to give details, and one in particular said there's really no prime directive, but there actually is, and we don't have to mention Hitler, how much the Holocaust did, and there was no interference there. Well, we're not going that. This is not the subject, so I don't really want to get off on another subject like I do and then come back on track. But Dr. Stephen Greer is one of the main founders of the Disclosure Project, but I'm very spiritual, very awake. Understand that I do not look for ETs because I understand that they're actually a part of you, just like nature is a part of you. You have to understand everything's connected, which means cycles in the universe. Nibiru, it's all a cycle that always happens, and it's necessary. And we'll go into that if we have time to go into that. But my question is, where is his goals? Okay, that's the first thing I have to ask. And I'm going to be playing just a little bit about just so you can hear it for yourself. But where is his goals? Every single time I hear Dr. Stephen Greer talk, I hear him talk about technology and funding. The two things that aren't going to be here in a minute, because you have to actually go down to basics, actually become spiritual, get back to basics balance so it can be brought up to a level 1 society, because we cannot survive on fossil fuels or a level 0's are at. You're trying to tell me that this technology will better the planet, better humankind. No, it's not, because humankind is the only thing that can better humankind. Technology is going to come because technology is expression of oneself. But like I said, I don't have too much time, so what I'm going to do is give you a little glimpse into this, and this way you can hear for yourself, so you can see for yourself where he's coming into play. But listen very closely, and you have to really ask yourself, where is his goals? Because his goals to me seem to be funding, which are one of the two major factors that are destroying our species and not allowing our species to advance. There's the currency in the economy, and the cabals, reptilians, call them whatever you want. And that's another thing. Dr. Greer never mentions that. But these two factors, between the cabals, reptilians, the currency and the economy, is actually preventing you from getting ahead as a species. It's holding you back as a species. So why would you want to give funding? Why would you want funding? Why would you want the technology when it's going to come? Because technology is an expression of oneself. This is the part I'll never understand. Because things have to happen at a quick pace, and that's what it is. A quick pace to take them off the planet, get rid of them, and start from scratch to get you up to a level 1. If you think of how fast the Atari 2600 came out, and it was the top of the notch system, and we went from the Atari 2600 to Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, and we went all the way to PlayStation, the Xbox, to where we are today in a very fast pace. Well, this graduate is going to be a lot faster than that. But anyways, let's not take too much more time on this. Let's go to Dr. Stephen Greer's this year where he had this, and you can listen to yourself and ask yourself, where is his goals? What is his motivation? Because technology and funding are, it's bizarre, but you can hear for yourself. Let's go to it.
So I want to thank all of you for coming. Some of you come from very far, Washington State and New Jersey and Michigan and all over. And I want to thank all of you for coming. The purpose of this meeting is to provide an update, but also a really big overview of the projects we're involved with, particularly dealing with the technology and free energy sector, because there's a lot of misunderstandings in the public on that. And that has been something that we've worked on now intensely for 15 years. This will be shared with the public via YouTube and the internet. And the reason for it is that there's a big learning curve to understanding the technology, but more importantly, to understanding the policy issues, the national security issues, the details of how you evaluate these technologies, and moving through the minefield of claims that are out there on the internet in particular, which has become a huge problem in the last year for us. So I want to first give you sort of the big picture. And the big picture is that we haven't needed fossil fuels since about 100 years ago. This building was built in 1913. Certainly by then, Tesla, Faraday, Maxwell, particularly the Maxwell quaternion equations that were chopped off and changed, as you may well know, some of you who are engineers, has resulted in us having an energy sector that requires us to burn something or heat something up to create steam to get us electricity or to run our cars. However, 100 years of really advanced physics, which weren't that well understood 100 years ago in terms of very high voltage systems at certain resonant high hertz, they call it, cycles per second. We'll get into this later, would result in this excess power. And it was observed by Faraday, and it was observed by Tesla, and it was observed by many others, and said, where is this coming from? Professor Dirac, D-I-R-A-C, said, well, he called it the Dirac Sea. And, of course, Tesla called it the sea of the ocean of infinite energy. And it's been called various things. The modern term is the zero-point energy field. And as many of you may know, one of the writers for Jane's Defense Weekly, Mr. Cook, wrote an article about this, Jane's Defense Weekly being a very big defense journal out of Great Britain, very prestigious journal, and then wrote a book called The Hunt for Zero Point, which I recommend, based on a lot of information that we had begun to put out, and particularly as it applies to propulsion. All right? So if you create this kind of vector into the zero-point energy field, and you create a certain counter-rotating vortex, let's call it, which is almost a Sufi-like phenomenon, you get what's called lift. And you get a phenomenon that's known as electromagnetogravitics. Now, the pop culture would call it anti-gravity, which is really not correct. What you're really doing when you see a UFO moving and it's going straight up 10,000 miles per hour against gravity is that it's actually in a space-time bubble. It's creating its own environment, shall we say. So there's no restrictions to normal aerodynamic formula. And so the thing can lift and go straight up at those velocities. And if it goes through another level, that the entire object, the mass of the entire object, can become massless. And this has to do with things that are very technical, that we'll get into a little bit later if you're interested in the technical part of this, which I think is fascinating. And that's when you enter into what's called the trans-dimensional physics, when something moves from one dimension to another, or transverses one dimension to another. By definition, all interstellar vehicles are transdimensional. Let me repeat that. If it's interstellar, it is transdimensional. It is not getting here at a subluminal or below the speed of light velocity. This is a key understanding, because most people will say, well, maybe they're interdimensional or maybe they're interstellar. And I'm going, you don't understand the physics of this. If it's interstellar and it's here, meaning it somehow went from another star system to here, and someone's lifespan, a creature's lifespan, even if you live to be 800 years old, it's got to be faster than the speed of light. But the term faster than the speed of light is a misnomer, because you're no longer bound by the physics of the speed of light or even the normal vacuum of space that we think of, because you've resonantly shifted into these, if you will, parallel universes or enfolded universes transdimensionally, and then you step back down into this one. Too much information? All right. So this is the key thing that people have to understand, and began to be studied. Now, in the early days, let's go back to the time of Tesla. They were observing with usually DC power systems, direct current, as opposed to alternating current, which we use in our homes, which Nikola Tesla invented or came up with. That would have this effect where a certain amount of energy would go into a system, more would come out. It wasn't really accepted until Dr. Casimir, a physicist named Casimir, and the Casimir effect, where this is published in mainstream physics journals, by the way, proved that there was this zero-point energy field, that there was this energy that was left even after you cooled down all the atoms and all the activity in the universe down to absolute zero, which is a specific temperature. And there's still this energy there. And that zero-point energy field, as it turns out, is embedded everywhere in space, not outer space, here in this room. So that every cubic centimeter of space in this room, for example, has enough power to run at least the United States for a day, a cubic centimeter. So it's an enormous field of energy. So running our planet on this energy field would be like taking a thimble out of the Great Lakes or something of water. It's a trivia. It's a rounding error. However, as J.P. Morgan famously was reported to have said to Nikola Tesla, when he had a car that had a little antenna on it that was running around where the batteries were charging themselves, J.P. Morgan said, if we can't put a meter on it, we don't want it. Big bankers. Now, 100 years ago or 90 years ago to today, nothing's really changed in terms of the geopolitical, financial, macroeconomic exigencies. And that's the huge problem. Is there a technical challenge? Yes. And we'll get into how we can mount a sort of effort together to come up with a modern-day version of what Tesla had. But the geopolitical, macroeconomic policy issue is the big problem. And it isn't just because there are a few bankers and kleptocrats that are misanthropic sociopaths, although some of them are. It's because there are a lot of stakeholders who don't want to have to deal with the change. I remember my military advisor once meeting with an admiral who was in charge of CONUS, Continental United States Security, saying, well, this is all wonderful, and I know that those technologies do exist in classified programs. It's too big of a change for me to have to deal with. I just want to see that everything stays in sort of a homeostasis. We don't rock the boat too much. And I retire from this command and get to go fishing at my place in Montana. No, really. All right. So having had dozens and dozens of meetings personally with people like that in the national security structure in Washington, in the United Kingdom, from France, and elsewhere, there is this consistent refrain of This is a great thing, but it's too big of a change. It's too big of a challenge.